Right guys, introducing a new segment to the show that I'm very much hoping and intending to become part of the weekly routine. And that is the Monday evenings BG's Boxing Betting Bulletin. Why did I call it BG's Boxing Betting Bulletin, you may ask? Well, it's because at school they always taught us that having slogans or titles with full of words with the same first letter is always a good way to be eye-catching. I believe it may be called alliteration, although if you're hotter in your English than I am, please correct me in the comments section below. So this is episode 1 of BG's Boxing Betting Bulletin. As I say, I'm hoping it's going to become a regular thing on Mondays. The reason for starting this, we often discuss betting on the podcast. I've discussed betting odds on a number of fights, and it seems to generate some type of interest. I get a lot of emails relating to betting advice and betting conversations, and that's actually picked up recently. I've had a bit of a good streak on the old boxing tipping. I've had some dodgy ones in the past, don't get me wrong, but I've had a few good results back to back. So at the minute, seeing as I'm on a bit of a streak, I thought now may be time to launch a new segment. So just to introduce it, the purpose of this segment is not necessarily to pick the fights where I think the winners are most definite. Say there was a fight where there was an extremely strong favourite who was obviously going to win, and the extremely strong favourite was 1-20 on. I probably wouldn't feature that in this segment. That's not because I don't think that's a definite win. It's because here what I'm looking to do is to find a gap in the odds. So what I'm getting at is the content of this video won't always focus on which bet is most likely to win. The content of this video will focus on where the biggest discrepancy is between the odds the bookmakers are offering and the percentage chance of that outcome happening. So to reiterate, if I found a fighter who was 3-1 and I felt he had a 40% chance of winning the fight, I would tip him in this segment, even though I would acknowledge there is a greater than 50% chance he will lose the fight. That is going to be my methodology here. So if you're still with me, if you're following me, let's get into it for week 1. Now, what I'm going to do in these videos is I'm going to have one main bet, which is going to be the bet of the week, and then I'm going to have a second bet, which is going to be a long shot of the week. And the long shot is going to have odds of 3-1 or greater. That is the intended plan. There may be one or two occasions I derogate from that, but that's my intention. The bet of the week is going to be, the bet that I think is the greatest opportunity, and the long shot is going to be what I see as an opportunity potentially for a small bet at greater than 3-1. So let's talk this week's bet of the week, and I'm very passionate about this week's bet of the week. There's going to be some times where I record this video, and because of the action on, I'm going to have to pick something, and it's not going to be something that I'm fully committed to. And in an instance that happens, I will make extremely clear that this is a smaller bet for me. But week 1, we're going to start with full intentions, and this is a bet that I am extremely confident in, and that is Frankie Gavin to beat Sam Eggington. Now, before we talk about the prices, before we talk about the odds in play here, let me ask you, sitting at home, what percentage chance do you give Frankie Gavin of beating Sam Eggington? Let's think about this. Neither of them are world beaters, we know that. They've got a common recent opponent in Bradley Skeet. Frankie Gavin shaded a win over Bradley Skeet, albeit in very, very close circumstances. Sam Eggington, for me, was schooled, outclassed, and a bit embarrassed by Bradley Skeet. Let's talk styles. Frankie Gavin is the epitome of the awkward, amateur pedigree technician. Frankie Gavin has class in abundance. He has technique in abundance. What he lacks is maybe elite level power and elite level athleticism at the weight. Sam Eggington, he's a bigger guy than Frankie Gavin. He's a younger guy than Frankie Gavin. He's potentially a fresher guy than Frankie Gavin. But he's lacking in experience, both in the pro game and in the amateur game. And for me, he's very, very raw. And that rawness, that greenness, was very evident in his performance against Bradley Skeet when he stepped up in class. There was a lot of... He looked quite wild. He looked quite amateurish comparison to Bradley Skeet. And that's not necessarily to his detriment, because Bradley Skeet is a very, very accomplished slickster in the ring. Having said that, just as Bradley Skeet is technical and awkward, as is Frankie Gavin. And whilst Frankie Gavin and Bradley Skeet pose very, very different challenges, I actually think they're both extremely technically sound fighters, and I think that's the kind of fighter that's going to expose Sam Eggington for still being a bit raw and for still being a bit green. So I like Gavin in the fight. Now Gavin is not typically a guy who has performed at the highest level. He lost a fight to Leonard Bundu. He lost a fight by knockout to Kell Brook. And there has to be some element of doubt as to whether Frankie Gavin could ever have been considered world-class based on those performances. However, this is the last chance saloon for Gavin. He's still a relatively young guy. He's still a guy with the potential to have some decent fights, and still a guy who has the potential to earn a few quid from the sport, a few quid more from the sports that I had. And a loss to Sam Eggington at this stage of his career would probably, represent the end for Frankie Gavin. So even though he's had some losses in the past, I think that this represents a true no-lose fight for Frankie Gavin. It's a local derby. It's going to be fighting in front of his home fans. And it's a fight where it's hard to see him coming back from if he were to take a loss here. So I think Frankie Gavin's going to be as motivated as he can be. I think Frankie Gavin's going to be on point. And I think Frankie Gavin should have enough to beat Sam Eggington in this fight. But let's go back to it. The question I'm posing to you is, what percentage chance do you give Frankie Gavin of winning this fight? Now, if you're watching this live, please feel free to leave a comment live before we start talking about odds. What percentage do you give? Now, if I'm analysing this fight, I'm going to be really, really honest and say I give Frankie Gavin an 80% chance. 80. I think if the guys fight 5 times, I'd expect Frankie Gavin to win 4 times. I don't think Eggington has the skill, the experience, the technique to outpoint Frankie Gavin. I don't think Eggington really has the power and the ability to land the power of shots he's going to need to land against an awkward opponent like Frankie Gavin. So I expect Frankie Gavin to win this fight. Look, this is boxing, nothing certainty. Frankie Gavin could get a cut. Frankie Gavin could hurt his hand. Frankie Gavin could run out of gas. Sam Eggington may just catch Frankie Gavin. Sam Eggington may be a harder puncher. He's certainly a younger, bigger guy. So there is the potential for an upset here. It's not a fight that I would say is a 95-5 fight. I see it as an 80-20 fight. And over the course of 5 fights, I would expect Frankie Gavin to show he is the substantially better fighter. I think we're looking at an accomplished technician versus a very, very green, raw, sloppier fighter. And whilst there are other factors at work, whilst Gavin isn't the model professional, at this level, which is, sub-European level, let's put it that way, I think Frankie Gavin does have enough to pull through. And I think Eggington's performance against Skeet showed he didn't have that. So I give Gavin an 80% chance. Now the odds really surprised me in this fight. You are currently able to get Frankie Gavin with a number of bookmakers, including major bookmakers such as Ladbrokes, at 10 to 11. I.e., if you put £11 on, you get £10 profit. That means the bookmakers are giving Frankie Gavin just over a 50% chance of winning this fight. Let's say circa 55%. Now, I haven't worked that out mathematically, but it's going to be in the low to mid 50s. So let's go 55% the bookmaker's giving him. And I see Frankie Gavin here as an 80% chance. You know, nothing's certain in boxing, nothing's ever certain in betting. So I never suggest putting money on that you can't afford to lose. But for me, and it all depends if you feel the same way, but for me, that is a bit of value. I see a substantial enough difference between the percentage call of the bookmakers and the percentage call of myself to make me want to have a play on those odds. Yeah, so I'm picking for my bet of the week Frankie Gavin to beat Sam Eggington at 10 to 11. I think it's a great bet, and for me it would be what I would class as quite a it would be a bet that I would be putting closer to my max usual bet on. It's one that I feel quite confident on. It's not one where I'm just picking one for the sake of making a video. I genuinely believe that the discrepancy there is pretty vast. But it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see what other people have said in the comments, because as I say, I've asked the question before we've even talked about the odds. So do you maybe see it as a 50-50 fight? Could this go either way? Let me know your thoughts. Now, let's talk long shot of the week. Now, this one, I'm going to be honest with you, this is not a bet that I feel passionate about. This is the kind of bet you maybe want to have some coins on rather than any real money. Because I was looking long and hard for a long shot before making this video, and I didn't actually find one that really stood out to me as a great bet. I actually looked at Anthony Ogogo this weekend and tried to work out if we could get him beat, because his opponent, Cunningham, is 6 to 1. And I thought Ogogo's not really convincing for me. Maybe we could take Cunningham at 6 to 1, but having researched it, Cunningham's been campaigning at a lower weight class. He carries very, very little power even at the lower weight classes, and Ogogo is a big athletic guy at middleweight, regardless of what you think about him. So yeah, I think I'm going to swerve that one. The long shot of the week for me, and as I say, this isn't one that I necessarily am confident of coming off, but it's one that I felt was generous in terms of the pricing, is with Paddy Power, and that is 9 to 1 on Frankie Gavin to stop Sam Eggington in round 7 to 12. Now, Frankie Gavin doesn't carry a lot of power. He is not known as a knockout artist. I appreciate that in advance before someone feels the need to point it out. But by pricing that at 9 to 1, Paddy Power are suggesting there is only a 10% chance of Sam Eggington being stopped in round 7 to 12. My concern here is that Sam Eggington is a very, very young fighter. He's only like 21, 22, 23, something like that. There's a lot of future out there for him. And my concern is that if the fight becomes uncompetitive, if Gavin starts to dominate and win round after round after round, which I suspect he may, I don't think it's completely incomprehensible that the fight could get stopped in the later rounds. Look, Sam Eggington's a warrior. I'm sure Sam Eggington would fight on. But there is an element when you've got a young fighter of, trying to keep him for another day. And whilst I think that Sam Eggington on balance probably will see the 12th round, at 9 to 1, I think that's generous. I think Frankie Gavin has the potential to dominate this fight. I think after 3 or 4 rounds we could see there is a vast technical gap between the two, and we could realise that Sam Eggington has very, very minimal chance in the fight, other than the chance of getting a haymaker. And I think as he starts to commit to swinging and throwing those big punches in the middle rounds when it's clear he's not going to win on points, a guy like Frankie Gavin is going to be able to counterpunch him and catch him. Could Frankie Gavin hurt him? Maybe. Frankie Gavin's not the biggest puncher, but it's not impossible. Could his corner pull him out if it becomes a bit messy? Maybe. Not one to put the house on. At 9 to 1, I think that's a slight discrepancy in the price. I see that more as a 6 to 1, 7 to 1 shot. So there we are, people. Bet of the week, Frankie Gavin to beat Sam Eggington, 10 to 11. Long shot of the week, Frankie Gavin to win by stoppage around 7 to 12, second half of the fight, 9 to 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of these bets? If you've enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and please share this new segment so I can get it out there to a wider audience. Thank you.